The autumn wind cut through Silver Creek Valley like a blade, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of an early winter. Marcus Sullivan pulled his weathered coat tighter as he guided his horse down the mountain trail toward town. At 52, he was a man carved from the harsh Colorado landscape. Broad shoulders, calloused hands, and eyes that had seen too much loss. 2 years had passed since consumption claimed his wife, Sarah, and 3 since a hunting accident took their son, Thomas. The ranch that once echoed with laughter now stood silent, save for the wind whistling through empty rooms. Marcus told himself he rode to Silver Creek for supplies, but the truth sat heavier in his chest. He rode to escape the ghosts that haunted his homestead. The town sprawled before him like a cluster of matchboxes against the towering peaks. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the familiar sounds of frontier life drifted on the crisp air. Marcus dismounted outside Porter's general store, tying his horse to the hitching post with practiced efficiency. That's when he saw her. A young woman stood outside the store, sweeping the wooden planks with mechanical precision. Her movements were stiff, careful, like someone who'd learned that the wrong gesture could bring pain. Her dress hung loose on her frame, and even from a distance, Marcus could see the yellowing bruise that spread across her left cheek like spilled ink. She couldn't have been more than 18, but her eyes held the wariness of someone much older. When she bent to gather dust into the pan, she moved gingerly, favoring her left side. "Victoria, damn girl, move faster!" The shout erupted from inside the store, harsh and cruel. "I ain't paying you to daydream!" The young woman, Victoria, flinched at the sound. Her grip tightened on the broom handle, knuckles white with strain. Marcus felt something cold and familiar settle in his stomach. He'd seen enough broken spirits in his time to recognize another one. Luther Blackwood emerged from the store like a thundercloud given form. The man was lean and mean, with the look of someone who found pleasure in others' pain. His eyes were small and dark, set in a face that seemed permanently twisted by cruelty. "You deaf girl?" Luther raised his hand, and Victoria instinctively stepped back. "No, sir," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, sir." Marcus found himself moving before conscious thought took hold. His boots struck the wooden planks with authority, each step deliberate and measured. "Problem here?" His voice cut through the tension like a knife through rope. Luther turned, squinting against the afternoon sun. "Marcus Sullivan. Didn't see you right in." The man's tone carried the false joviality of someone caught in an ugly act. "I can see that." Marcus's gaze shifted to Victoria, taking in the full extent of her injuries. Besides the facial bruising, he noted the careful way she held herself, the fear that radiated from her like heat from a forge. "This your daughter?" "Stepdaughter," Luther corrected with a sneer. "Her mother was my late wife. Girl's been nothing but trouble since." Marcus looked at Victoria again. She kept her eyes downcast, but he could see the shame burning in her cheeks. No child, and despite her age, that's what she was, deserved to carry that kind of burden. "Seems to me she's working hard enough," Marcus observed. Luther's face darkened. "Ain't your concern, Sullivan. Girl owes me for room and board. Has since her mother passed." "Does she now?" Marcus stepped closer, and Luther instinctively backed up. "And how long you planning to collect on that debt?" "Long as it takes." The answer hung in the air like smoke from a bad fire. Marcus had heard enough. He turned to Victoria, whose eyes had finally lifted to meet his. "What's your name?" "Victoria Hayes," she answered softly. "Victoria, you got anywhere else to go?" She shook her head, the movement barely perceptible. Marcus nodded once, decision crystallizing in his mind with surprising clarity. "You do now." Luther Blackwood's face went from pale to red to purple in the span of 3 heartbeats. "Now wait just a damn minute." "No." Marcus's voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. "You wait. I've seen how you treat her, and I've heard enough to know it ain't right. Victoria, gather your things." Victoria stared at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign tongue. I don't understand." "I'm offering you work, clean work, honest pay, and a place where no one raises a hand to you. That clear enough?" Luther stepped forward, puffing up like an angry rooster. "You can't just take her. She's my responsibility, my—" You're what? Marcus turned the full weight of his attention on Luther, and the smaller man faltered. Your property? She's a person, not livestock. And if you think you can stop her from leaving, you're welcome to try. The threat in Marcus's voice was unmistakable. Luther might be cruel, but he wasn't stupid. Marcus Sullivan had a reputation in these parts. Fair but hard, and not a man to cross lightly. This ain't over, Luther muttered, but he stepped aside. Marcus looked back at Victoria. Your choice, miss. Stay here or come with me, but choose now. Victoria's hands trembled as she set down the broom. For a moment, Marcus thought she might refuse, too beaten down to believe in the possibility of escape. Then she straightened her shoulders with visible effort. I'll come with you. Good. Get what's yours. Victoria disappeared inside, returning moments later with a small cloth bundle that couldn't have contained more than a change of clothes and a few personal items. Everything she owned in the world, Marcus realized, and it fit in something smaller than a saddlebag. Luther watched from the store's doorway, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. You'll regret this, Sullivan. Mark my words. Marcus helped Victoria onto his horse, noting how she settled behind him with the careful movements of someone whose body was a catalog of old injuries. As they rode away from Silver Creek, he felt her grip tighten on his coat. Why? She asked after they'd put some distance between themselves and the town. Marcus considered the question as they climbed the winding trail toward his ranch. Why had he intervened? He could tell himself it was simple decency, but the truth ran deeper. Maybe it was the way Victoria's situation echoed his own losses. Maybe it was the recognition that they were both broken in different ways. Or maybe it was just that he'd stood by and watched enough suffering for one lifetime. Sometimes a man sees something that ain't right, and he's got to choose, he said finally. Stand by and let it happen, or do something about it. But you don't know me. I know enough. Marcus guided his horse around a fallen log. I know you didn't deserve what he was doing to you. I know you're stronger than you think, or you wouldn't have survived this long. And I know everyone deserves a chance at something better. The ranch came into view as they crested the final ridge. The main house sat in a natural clearing, built from local timber and stone, with a wraparound porch that faced the valley. The barn and outbuildings were well maintained, speaking to their owner's character even in his grief. Victoria's intake of breath was audible. It's beautiful. It's home, Marcus said simply, though the word felt strange on his tongue after so many months of loneliness. He helped her down from the horse, noting again how carefully she moved. Inside, the house was clean but sparse, with the hollow feeling of a place where laughter had died. Marcus showed her to the spare room, Thomas's old room, though he didn't mention that. Bed's got clean sheets, he said, setting her bundle on the quilt. There's a wash basin and pitcher, and the privy's out back. You hungry? Victoria nodded hesitantly. I'll put something together. Rest if you need to. In the kitchen, Marcus found himself staring at the pot of stew he'd made the night before. When was the last time he'd cooked for someone else? When was the last time another voice had echoed through these rooms? He ladled the stew into 2 bowls, cut thick slices of bread, and called Victoria to the table. She emerged from the room looking overwhelmed, her eyes taking in every detail of the house as if she couldn't quite believe she was there. They ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the wind rattling the windows. Marcus watched Victoria eat with the focused intensity of someone who'd learned not to take meals for granted. This is good, she said softly. My Sarah's recipe. The words came out before Marcus could stop them, bringing with them a familiar ache. Your wife? Was. Consumption took her 2 years back. Marcus set down his spoon, surprised by how easy it was to talk about. Our boy Thomas died the year before. Hunting accident. Victoria's eyes filled with sympathy. I'm sorry. Life's got a way of taking what matters most, Marcus said. Question is what you do after. After dinner, Marcus showed Victoria around the ranch, pointing out the barn, the chicken coop, and the small vegetable garden that had grown wild in his neglect. She listened intently, asking quiet questions about the animals and the land. What would you like me to do? She asked as they stood on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Tomorrow? Whatever you feel up to. Garden could use attention. Chickens need tending. But tonight, just rest. You're safe here, Victoria. That's a promise. She looked at him with something that might have been hope. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Marcus, he corrected. We're family now, such as it is. That night, as Marcus sat by the fire with his evening coffee, he heard the soft sound of crying from the spare room. He didn't intrude. Some tears needed to fall in private. But for the first time in months, the house didn't feel quite so empty. Dawn came pale and cold over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of silver and gold. Marcus woke to the sound of movement in the kitchen. Quiet, careful sounds that spoke of someone trying not to disturb others. He found Victoria at the stove, attempting to coax life from the cold cast iron. She'd changed into her other dress, and though it was as worn as the first, she'd taken care to braid her hair neatly. Coffee's harder than it looks on that old stove, Marcus said, making her jump. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Nothing to apologize for. Marcus moved to the stove, adjusting the damper and adding kindling to the firebox. Takes a particular touch. Sarah always said I was the only one who could make it behave. Within minutes, the familiar aroma of brewing coffee filled the kitchen. Victoria watched his movements with the intensity of someone memorizing every detail. You're studying me like a hawk studies a rabbit, Marcus observed with a hint of amusement. Victoria colored. I want to learn. I want to be useful. You're useful just by being here. The words surprised them both. Marcus hadn't realized the truth of them until he spoke. House has been too quiet for too long. Over breakfast, Marcus outlined the day's work. The vegetable garden needed to be cleared and prepared for winter storage. The chickens needed fresh straw in their nesting boxes. There were fences to mend and firewood to split. I can help with all of that, Victoria said eagerly. Marcus studied her face, noting the determined set of her jaw. Garden's probably the best place to start. Work at your own pace. Your body's still healing. Victoria's hand instinctively went to her ribs, then dropped quickly. I'm fine. I'm sure you are. But healing and being fine aren't the same thing. They worked together in companionable silence. Marcus splitting wood while Victoria tackled the overgrown garden. She moved slowly at first, testing her limits, but as the morning progressed, her movements became more confident. Marcus found himself stealing glances at her as she worked. There was something deeply satisfying about watching life return to the neglected garden under her careful attention. She had a natural way with plants, talking to them softly as she worked. You've done this before, he observed during their noon break. My mother had a garden, Victoria said, settling carefully on the porch steps. Before she married Luther, she taught me about growing things, about how plants are like people. They need the right conditions to thrive. What happened to her? Victoria's face clouded. Fever, Luther said, but she was getting better. And then, she shrugged, the gesture heavy with unsaid words. Marcus felt cold anger settle in his chest. He'd known men like Luther Blackwood, men who sucked the life from everything around them. She sounds like she was a good mother. She was. Victoria's voice was soft with memory. She used to say that gardens were hope made visible. Every seed you plant is a promise that tomorrow will come. They spent the afternoon working side by side, Marcus repairing fence posts while Victoria continued her assault on the garden's weeds. As the day wore on, he noticed how she gradually relaxed, her movements becoming less guarded. You sing, he observed as a soft melody drifted from where she worked. Victoria stopped abruptly, color flooding her cheeks. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Don't stop. Marcus straightened from his work. Haven't heard music in this place for too long. My mother taught me the songs, Victoria said hesitantly. She said music makes the work lighter. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. That evening, Marcus taught Victoria how to work the temperamental coffee pot, how to adjust the stove's dampers for even heat, and how to bank the fire for the night. She absorbed every lesson with fierce concentration. You don't have to learn everything in one day, he said as they sat on the porch after dinner. I want to earn my keep. Marcus turned to study her profile in the lamplight. Victoria, look at me. She met his eyes reluctantly. You don't owe me anything. You're not paying off a debt. You're here because no one should have to live the way you were living. But I don't understand why you care. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Maybe because I know what it's like to feel powerless. When Sarah got sick, when Thomas died, I couldn't do anything to stop it. Couldn't protect them. But I can protect you. Victoria's eyes shimmered in the lamplight. I've forgotten what it feels like to be safe. Then we'll help you remember. That night, Marcus lay in bed listening to the sounds of another person in his home. Quiet footsteps, the soft closing of a door, the whisper of fabric as Victoria settled into sleep. For the first time since his family's deaths, the silence didn't feel like a weight pressing down on his chest. 3 weeks passed in peaceful routine. Victoria's bruises faded to yellow and green, then disappeared entirely. Her movements became less guarded, her smiles more frequent. The garden flourished under her care, and Marcus found himself looking forward to their shared meals and evening conversations on the porch. It was too good to last. Marcus was repairing a broken axle on his wagon when he heard horses approaching, multiple riders moving at an urgent pace. He straightened, hand automatically moving to the rifle he kept propped against the barn wall. Sheriff Wade Blackwood rode into the yard with 2 deputies flanking him. Luther's brother wore his badge like a crown, and his smile held all the warmth of a snake's belly. "Sullivan," Wade called out, not bothering to dismount. "We need to talk." "About what?" Marcus kept his voice level, though every instinct screamed danger. "About the girl you kidnapped from my brother." "Kidnapped?" Marcus let the word hang in the air. "That's an interesting way to describe offering someone a job." Wade's smile widened. "Girl's a minor under her guardian's care. Taking her against his will is a crime. She's 18 and made her own choice." "You got proof of her age?" Wade's tone suggested he knew Marcus didn't. "Because Luther's got papers saying she's 17. Makes her his responsibility until she comes of age." Marcus felt ice form in his veins. Of course Luther would have documentation. Men like him always covered their tracks. "Where is she?" Wade continued. "Bring her out, and we'll discuss this reasonable-like." "Discuss what, exactly?" "Her return to her legal guardian." Victoria appeared in the barn doorway, rifle in hand. The sight of her armed and ready sent a surge of pride through Marcus's chest. Whatever else had happened, Victoria Hayes was nobody's victim anymore. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, voice steady despite the tremor Marcus could hear underneath. Wade's eyes fixed on the rifle. "Now, girl, you don't want to do something stupid." "Only stupid thing I ever did was stay with Luther as long as I did." "Legal guardian," Wade repeated. "Law's the law." "Whose law?" Marcus stepped forward, drawing the sheriff's attention back to him. "The kind that lets a man beat a girl bloody and call it discipline?" "You got proof of abuse?" Marcus gestured at Victoria. "Look at her when I found her. Anyone with eyes could see. I see a girl who probably fell down some stairs. Clumsy types, young ladies. Always hurting themselves." The casual dismissal of Victoria's suffering sent white-hot rage through Marcus's system. His hand tightened on the rifle. "Easy, Sullivan," Wade said, noting the movement. "No need for this to get messy. Just hand over the girl, and we'll forget this misunderstanding ever happened." "Not happening." Wade's expression hardened. "Then I'll have to arrest you for kidnapping and harboring a runaway minor." "Try it." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Marcus could feel Victoria's tension behind him, could see the deputies' hands hovering near their weapons. One wrong move, and blood would spill in his yard. "This ain't over," Wade said finally, wheeling his horse around. "Luther's got rights, and I aim to see them protected." Marcus watched them ride away, not lowering his rifle until they disappeared behind the ridge. Only then did he turn to Victoria. "You all right?" She nodded, though her knuckles were white where she gripped her weapon. "What do we do now?" "Now we prepare." Marcus moved to stand beside her, both of them watching the empty trail. "Because they'll be back, and next time they won't come asking nicely." That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with paper and ink, composing letters to old friends and allies. If Luther Blackwood wanted a fight, he'd get one, but not the kind he was expecting. Victoria watched him write, her own hands busy cleaning and oiling the small pistol Marcus had given her. "Who are you writing to?" she asked. "People who understand that sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing." Marcus signed another letter with a flourish. "Dutch Kowalski fought with me in the war. Iron Pete Morrison knows every trail in these mountains. Jake Porter runs the general store and has no love for the Blackwoods. You think they'll help? Marcus looked up at her, noting the resolve in her eyes. I think when people see what's right, they'll stand up for it. And if they don't, well, we'll handle it ourselves. Victoria nodded, understanding passing between them without words. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The responses to Marcus's letters came swiftly, carried by men who rode hard and asked few questions. Dutch Kowalski arrived first, a mountain of a man with graying hair and scars that told stories of old battles. He'd served under Marcus during the war and followed him through hell and back. Heard you got woman trouble, Dutch said, swinging down from his horse with a grin. Not woman trouble, Marcus corrected. Trouble with men who think women are property. Same difference. What do you need? Iron Pete Morrison came next, silent as his nickname suggested. The half-Cherokee tracker could read sign like scripture and move through the mountains like smoke. He spoke little but understood everything. Jake Porter closed his store early to ride out, bringing supplies and information. Wade's been asking questions, he reported. Wants to know who's been buying extra ammunition, who's been sending letters. Man spooked? Good, Marcus said. Spooked men make mistakes. By the end of the week, 8 men had gathered at the ranch. Not soldiers, but something just as dangerous. Men with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Victoria watched them plan with fascination and growing confidence. These weren't the broken-down drifters she'd known in Silver Creek. These were capable men who'd chosen to stand with Marcus because they believed in what he was doing. You're building an army, she observed one evening as she and Marcus sat on the porch. I'm building a family, Marcus corrected. Army fights for orders. Family fights for each other. The distinction mattered, and Victoria understood why. She'd never had a family like this. People who would risk everything simply because it was right. What if Luther brings more men? Then we'll deal with more men. Marcus's voice carried calm certainty. But I don't think it'll come to that. Bullies like Luther count on fear and isolation. When they see they're outnumbered and outgunned, they usually find someone easier to pick on. Victoria hoped he was right, but something in her gut suggested Luther Blackwood wasn't the type to back down easily. Men like him would rather burn everything than admit defeat. Her suspicions proved correct 3 nights later. Marcus woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Dutch's voice shouting alarm. He rolled from bed, grabbed his rifle, and rushed outside to find the barn blazing like a beacon against the night sky. How bad, he asked Dutch, who was already organizing the men into bucket brigades. Could have been worse. Pete saw them coming and gave warning. Saved most of the animals. Marcus watched flames lick at the sky, orange light dancing across the faces of his allies. This was Luther's answer. If he couldn't take Victoria legally, he'd make Marcus's life too expensive to maintain. Any casualties? Marcus asked. Just pride and timber, Iron Pete said, emerging from the smoke. But they left something behind. He handed Marcus a piece of paper, singed around the edges. The message was brief and unsigned. Give us the girl or lose everything. Victoria appeared at Marcus's side, soot-stained and determined. This is my fault. No, Marcus said firmly. This is their choice. They chose violence over law. They chose cruelty over mercy. That's on them, not you. But if I went back, you'd be dead inside a year. Marcus turned to face her fully. Maybe literally, definitely spiritually. I won't let that happen. Victoria stared at the burning barn, her face illuminated by flames. Then what do we do? Marcus looked around at his allies, scarred men with steady hands and loyal hearts. They'd lost the barn, but they were all alive and unbroken. Luther had escalated the conflict, but he'd also shown his hand. Now we stop playing defense, Marcus said. Now we take the fight to them. Dutch grinned, the expression fierce in the firelight. About damn time. They came at dawn, not the stealthy approach Luther might have preferred, but a show of force designed to intimidate. 20 men on horseback, led by Sheriff Wade Blackwood and a stranger in a federal marshal's coat. Marcus watched them approach from his position behind the reinforced fence posts Dutch and Iron Pete had installed. The barn was a pile of cooling ash, but it had served its purpose as a rallying cry. Every man in the valley who'd ever been wronged by the Blackwoods had found his way to the Sullivan Ranch. Marcus Sullivan, the federal marshal's voice carried across the yard. I'm Marshal Cornelius Hartwell, and I have a warrant for your arrest. What charges? Marcus called back, though he suspected he knew. Kidnapping, harboring a fugitive, and obstruction of justice. Marcus stepped into view, rifle across his chest but not aimed. And I suppose Luther Blackwood swore out those charges? Legal guardian has rights under territorial law. Rights don't include beating a girl bloody. Marshal Hartwell consulted his papers. I see no mention of abuse in the complaint, just a concerned stepfather wanting his daughter returned. Victoria appeared beside Marcus, her own rifle steady in her hands. The transformation from the broken girl he'd found 3 months ago was complete. She stood like a woman who knew her worth and wouldn't surrender it. I'm not his daughter, she called out. I'm not his property, and I'm not going anywhere. Miss Hayes, the marshal said, his tone patronizing. You're young and confused. These men have filled your head with lies about your stepfather. Come with us and we'll sort this out properly. I know the difference between truth and lies, Victoria replied. I know the difference between protection and abuse, and I know which side of this fence represents which. Wade Blackwood spurred his horse forward. Enough talk! We're taking the girl, and anyone who interferes will answer to federal authority. Federal authority backed by local corruption, Dutch called out from his position. How much Luther pay you, Marshal? Hartwell's face darkened. That's slander. That's truth, Iron Pete said, materializing from behind a boulder, with his rifle trained on the marshal. Question is whether you're corrupt or just stupid. The standoff stretched taut. 20 men facing 12, but Marcus's people held better positions and fought for something they believed in. That counted for a lot. Last chance, Wade said, hand hovering over his sidearm. Give us the girl, or we'll take her. Marcus felt Victoria tense beside him. This was the moment, the fulcrum on which everything balanced. He could surrender her and watch Luther Blackwood destroy what was left of her spirit, or he could fight and risk everything. It wasn't really a choice at all. No, Marcus said simply. The first shot came from Wade's direction. Whether he drew first or one of his men got nervous, Marcus never knew. But once the firing started, it spread like wildfire. Marcus threw himself sideways, tackling Victoria behind the cover of a water trough as bullets whined overhead. Dutch's rifle boomed from the house, and Iron Pete's sharpshooting skills proved their worth as one of Wade's deputies tumbled from his saddle. Stay down, Marcus shouted to Victoria as he returned fire. Like hell. She rose just enough to sight down her rifle barrel and squeeze off a shot that sent another attacker diving for cover. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. When the smoke cleared, Wade Blackwood lay dead in Marcus's yard, and Marshal Hartwell was bleeding from a shoulder wound that left his gun arm useless. Luther Blackwood, Marcus noted with grim satisfaction, was nowhere to be seen. The man was a coward as well as a bully. Anybody hurt? Marcus called out. Jake took a graze on his arm, Dutch reported. Nothing serious. Marcus rose slowly, keeping his rifle ready. The surviving attackers were backing away, their stomach for the fight clearly gone. Hartwell clutched his wounded shoulder, his face pale with shock and pain. This isn't over, the marshal said through gritted teeth. Yes, it is, Victoria said, stepping out from behind the trough. Because next time you come here, you'd better bring an army, and you'd better bring proof that isn't bought and paid for by Luther Blackwood. Hartwell looked at her, really looked, and Marcus saw the moment when the man realized what he'd been part of. Victoria Hayes wasn't a confused child or a runaway. She was a woman who'd found her strength and wouldn't give it up. Get off my land, Marcus said quietly, all of you, and tell Luther Blackwood that if he shows his face here again, he'll join his brother. They left, carrying their wounded and their dead. Marcus watched them go, feeling something settle in his chest that had been restless for months. Is it really over? Victoria asked, moving to stand beside him. Marcus looked down at her, this fierce, brave woman who'd become his daughter in all the ways that mattered. The fighting might be, but the living, that's just getting started. Winter came early to Silver Creek Valley. blanketing the mountains in snow and wrapping the Sullivan Ranch in pristine silence. The barn had been rebuilt stronger than before, and the bullet holes in the fence posts served as reminders of how far they'd all come. Victoria stood in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she kneaded bread dough. The movements came naturally now. She'd learned to read the dough's texture, to know when it needed more flour or another minute of working. Outside, Marcus was splitting firewood with the steady rhythm that marked his approach to all tasks. The past month had been one of quiet healing. Wade Blackwood was buried in Silver Creek Cemetery, and Luther had seemingly vanished. Some said he'd headed south to Arizona Territory. Others claimed he'd drunk himself to death in a Denver saloon. Victoria didn't care which story was true as long as he stayed gone. Marshall Hartwell had returned with new papers, documents bearing the territorial governor's seal that officially named Marcus Sullivan as Victoria Hayes's legal guardian. The marshal had been subdued during his second visit, his wounded shoulder a visible reminder of what happened when federal authorities served corrupt local interests. "Smells good in here," Marcus said, stamping snow from his boots as he entered. "Sarah's recipe," Victoria replied, using the name naturally now. She'd taken to speaking of Marcus's late wife as if she'd known her, drawing comfort from the connection. She'd be pleased to see her kitchen being used properly again. Marcus hung his coat on the peg by the door. "Coffee? Already brewing." They'd developed dozens of small rituals like this, domestic rhythms that spoke of family and belonging. Victoria had never experienced anything like it during her years with Luther, where every interaction carried the potential for violence. "Dutch and Iron Pete are heading back to their own places come spring," Marcus mentioned as they sat at the table. Victoria felt a pang of loss. The men who'd stood with them had become part of their extended family. "Will we see them again?" "Every summer for Roundup and whenever we need them." Marcus smiled. "Some bonds don't break with distance." Victoria nodded, understanding. She'd learned about different types of bonds over the past months, the chains of blood and law that had held her to Luther, and the chosen ties of loyalty and love that bound her to Marcus. "I've been thinking," Victoria said carefully, "about what comes next." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I want to learn to read better, write properly, maybe study some books about ranching and business." "Planning to take over the operation?" Victoria colored slightly. "I want to be useful, really useful, not just someone you feed and shelter out of kindness." Marcus set down his coffee cup and fixed her with a serious look. "Victoria, you listen to me. You've never been just someone I feed and shelter. You brought life back to this place. You reminded me what it means to have family." "But I'm not really your daughter." "The hell you're not." Marcus's voice carried absolute conviction. "Blood doesn't make family, girl. Choice does. Commitment does. Love does. And by all those measures, you're my daughter, as surely as if Sarah had borne you herself." Victoria felt tears sting her eyes. She'd dreamed of hearing words like these during the dark years with Luther, but she'd never dared believe they could be real. "I love you too," she whispered. "Pa." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Marcus smiled, the first truly unguarded smile Victoria had seen from him. "Well then," he said, "I reckon we'd better start planning your education. Can't have my daughter running this ranch without proper knowledge." They spent the evening poring over catalogs and letters from distant schools, planning a future that stretched beyond simple survival. Victoria would study during the winter months when ranch work slowed, and Marcus would teach her everything he knew about cattle and land management. As the fire burned low in the hearth, Victoria found herself thinking about her mother's words. "Gardens are hope made visible." This ranch, this family, this new life, they were all gardens of a sort, carefully tended and nurtured into something beautiful. "Pa," she said softly. "Yes, thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for fighting for me." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for letting me." Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the world in clean whiteness. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the darkness sat by the fire, planning a future built on the unshakable foundation of chosen family. The wind still howled across the mountains, but it no longer sounded lonely. It sounded like home. 5 years later, Victoria Hayes Sullivan stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. She wore a simple wedding dress, cream-colored silk that she'd ordered from Denver, and her dark hair was braided with wildflowers that Marcus had picked that morning. "Ready?" Marcus asked, emerging from the house in his best black suit. Victoria smiled, thinking of how far they'd both traveled from that autumn day when he'd found her broken and afraid outside Porter's store. She was 23 now, educated and confident, the sole heir to one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. But more than that, she was loved and protected by a man who'd proven that family was about choice, not blood. "I'm ready," she said, taking his arm. The ceremony would be small. Dutch and Iron Pete had ridden in for the occasion, along with Jake Porter and a handful of other friends who'd stood with them during the dark days. Victoria's groom was a young doctor from Denver, a gentleman named David Chen, who'd won Marcus's grudging approval after a courtship that lasted 2 full years. As they walked toward the small chapel they'd built on the ranch, Victoria thought about the journey that had brought her here. The scared, broken girl who'd swept Porter's porch was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth and wouldn't accept anything less than she deserved. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, noticing her quiet mood. "No," Victoria said, and realized she meant it. "I know what love looks like now. Real love. The kind that protects instead of destroys, that builds up instead of tears down." Marcus squeezed her arm. "Your mother would be proud." Victoria smiled, thinking of the woman who taught her about gardens and hope. "Both my mothers would be proud." After the ceremony, as the small gathering celebrated on the ranch porch, Victoria found a quiet moment with Marcus. The man who'd saved her, raised her, and taught her what family could be looked older now, silver threading through his dark hair, but his eyes still held the same steady strength that had drawn her to trust him all those years ago. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what? For choosing me, for fighting for me, for showing me that I was worth fighting for?" Marcus smiled, the expression warm with paternal pride. "You would have figured that out on your own eventually. I just gave you a safe place to do it." Victoria laughed, shaking her head. "Even now you're trying to give me all the credit, because it belongs to you. Everything you've become, every strength you've shown, that came from inside you. I just made sure nobody could hurt you while you found it." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Victoria Hayes Sullivan looked out over the land that had become her sanctuary and her home. Tomorrow she would begin a new chapter with David, but she would never forget the lesson Marcus had taught her, that the strongest bonds aren't forged by blood or law, but by choice and love and the willingness to stand up for what's right. Sometimes, she reflected, the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or possessions or even safety. Sometimes the greatest gift is simply believing in them when they can't believe in themselves. The wind still howled across Silver Creek Valley, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of winter. But to Victoria, it would always sound like the voice of freedom calling her home. Marcus Sullivan's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't drawing a gun or riding into battle. It's choosing to see someone's worth when the world has convinced them they have none. Victoria's transformation from a broken girl to a confident woman shows us that healing is possible, that family can be chosen, and that love truly can conquer the darkest circumstances. What moved you most about Marcus and Victoria's journey? Was it the moment he first stood up to Luther, the quiet scenes of Victoria learning to trust again, or perhaps the final battle where she fought for her own freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing which parts of these stories resonate most with our viewers. And if you're new here, welcome to our channel. We specialize in bringing you the most compelling historical fiction and Western romance stories, tales of strong characters who overcome impossible odds through courage, love, and determination. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. For our returning viewers, thank you for continuing this journey with us. Your support means everything, and your comments often inspire the themes we explore in future tales. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these stories of hope and resilience travel around the world. Until next time, remember, sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into, and there's always hope for a new beginning, no matter how dark things may seem.